With a contract status update and more, this is Wrestling Rambles. My name is John and you're watching the Wrestling Report. Before we move on, make sure you subscribe to Wrestling Rambles with notifications on and don't forget to like the video. With Pat McAfee announcing that he will be hosting an episode of College Game Day live from Dublin, Ireland tomorrow, he could be seen recently with WWE star Sheamus at a bar. Here's the video.
Lads, you all ready?
Yeah!
All right, here we go. Welcome to my hometown of Dublin, Ireland.
Yeah!
Welcome to the Willy Wonka's Chocolate Factory of proper drinkers.
Yeah!
And here, it's the greatest weekend that you will never remember.
Yeah!
Slot your patty, slot your corner. Drinks are on Pat McAfee tonight.
Recently, former WWE star Jinder Mahal touched on his departure from the company and his plans for the future, telling Talk is Jericho, "It was actually my plan while I was in WWE. I said it in all the promos and I noticed WWE didn't trademark it. I actually used it before WWE. I said it before WWE when I was released the last time, so I wanted to brand it. Going forward, I can do anything. I can have merchandise or any product or any line. I can do Maharaja branding. I think it is kind of synonymous with myself now. So the last 2 years, I wasn't doing much. I was managing Indus Share. In a way, they had retired me. They told me I wasn't an active wrestler anymore, which was kind of weird. I think maybe they just wanted the focus to be on Indus Share. I don't know, something fresh, something new, which I get because I had become very stale. Creative-wise, I wasn't doing much, which is okay. I get it. I get it. Things change. That's how my career has always been. Reflecting on the backstage environment in WWE during his return at SummerSlam, Arn Anderson said this on his podcast. "Totally different. Everybody you saw just had a little pep in their step and they were skipping around. And hey, how you doing? Nice to meet you. We've never met." But it was all in the course of doing their job. They were tickled to death and they should have been. They were going to be appearing or participating in the second biggest show of the year. So why wouldn't you be? Everything was loose. Everybody was in a positive mood. It was just a whole different feeling, whole different vibe, period, which means it's being done right and done right by the right people. Being there and knowing the responsibilities that I had on pay-per-view day, there's no downtime. So I waited to go up to. Cody had already went to the ring and was in the final stages of his match before I ever even went up there because I didn't want to be a distraction, and that's what it would have been. So I just kind of stayed in catering, stayed out of everybody's way. And then when the match was over, I walked up, obviously, hugged Cody's neck. Hunter came around, hugged his neck. I didn't take any time away from the job because I can only imagine how dialed in he's got to be. He's sitting at the helm of a 3.5-hour show that's just God knows the content that he is responsible for. But you know, that picture was pretty cool and it's on a personal note, and I always had a really good relationship, and it was very rewarding to have that picture for me personally with Brock and Hunter and myself. It's a personal thing with me. It's not publicity, it's a personal thing, and it goes all the way back. He was one of the kids that when he first came to WCW, Ric Flair and I threw him in the back of the Cadillac and said, "You're going with us." And you knew just right away, just talking to him for 10 minutes, he has had his head on right, had all the right goals. Everything was in line. Recalling how he could shoot down ideas from creative in WWE, Chris Jericho noted on his podcast, "I told Vince McMahon on the phone they had just done this thing where Mark Henry had sex with Mae Young, and I said, are you ever going to make me do anything like that, because I don't really feel comfortable doing the sexual stuff. If there is anything you ever don't want to do, just tell me. You don't have to do it. We'll never have you do anything like that anyway." To his credit, I never had to do anything that ridiculous. I don't think I did anything that ridiculous. Talking about the AEW contracts of the Young Bucks, Jim Cornette said this on his Experience podcast. "The Young Bucks have never meant less. Their presence on the show is one of the things that hurts it. The wrestling public at large is not accepting of them because their matches are repetitive and their characters don't feel genuine. They're not only making a lot of money and working a job where they often do pre-tapes in the back while wearing headsets and telling people what to do. I wonder if that counts as a workday and if they're paid for it. They had to go there, so the point is, they got a screwy deal with all that money and limited dates. They started the whole thing claiming they wanted to change the world as part of the elite in all elite wrestling. They wanted to change the world and are executive vice presidents. Guess what? If you're an executive vice president or any kind of wrestling booker or promoter in a real company, you don't get days off. Forget that. When everybody else is off, you're on. As Ole Anderson used to say, wrestlers show up and wrestle if booked, and if not, they're off. I think some people might think differently, but with these two who have everything handed to them, Tony Khan was scared they'd go to WWE. He should have let them, because it would have removed a drag on his ratings and all those crummy TV segments. They would have been exposed for what they are, a couple of cosplaying kids who didn't realize how out of their depth they were until they got there. Now they're getting paid and don't have to work, but that just means that nobody is calling for them to work less. Only the guy paying them millions of dollars is aware of them. As Matt Riddle ended up becoming a champion at a AAA event on the 17th, the reason for this was mentioned by Dave Meltzer of the Wrestling Observer. Matt Riddle won a three-way over Champion Commander and Laredo Kid to win the AAA Cruiserweight title. This was basically getting the belt off Commander because he's with AEW. Revealing the origin of his body bag gimmick, The Undertaker noted on his 6 Feet Under podcast, "Guys like Arn Anderson, not necessarily gimmick guys, but obviously I'm a gimmick. I think I had a pretty good handle on the gimmick, but I always wanted to be more than the gimmick. I wanted to be a top wrestler as well as having this gimmick. Guys like Arn Anderson and Brett, guys like that would have been nice to have some of their feedback because they had a different insight on their approach. They were such technicians. Those kind of guys, but everybody else, whatever. Not that there couldn't have been some good critiques. Triple H occasionally would offer things up, and I always respected it because I felt like he had a really good eye not only for what he was doing. Even when he was just a talent, he had a pretty good grasp, especially of the top guys, for what they were doing. He's always been in that role of knowledge and having an understanding. I think he had a pretty good understanding of what I was trying to do, so if he had something, he would share it. Ricky Steamboat came up with the idea of the body bag, of taking the body bags out and taking my beaten, prone opponents in a body bag and carrying them out. He just came up to me. He said, "Hey, did you ever think about doing this?" And I was like, "This is genius." Revealing his intent to bring back the Usi chants in WWE, Jey Uso said this at Fanatics Fest NYC. "We're going to bring it back, Us. By far, Usi, that segment was the most laughing on TV. That was the coolest and most embarrassing moment for me. I didn't know what to do. It was fun. I don't like watching it back. There were a couple of times where I was laughing on TV every week, and then I started thinking to myself, I'm being unprofessional, I think. I couldn't help it because when we're doing the shots, we're doing them live. They're counting it down. I'm just standing there, and I don't know what he's going to say. He's looking at me trying to make me laugh. My brothers, too. It's real hard when I have eye contact with my brothers. It's hard for me not to smile. Solo can keep a stone cold face." At that same event, LA Knight said this regarding a potential match against John Cena, who is set for a retirement tour next year. Former tag partners, you never know. He might want to come back and get this United States Championship one more time. A guy who has been a staple for this championship. I would field that challenge for sure. With him being my tag partner, I might just know him a little bit. You talk about the greatest of all time and what some might call the future. Explaining why the episode of AEW Dynamite this week in the UK aired on tape delay, President of AEW Tony Khan said this during the media call prior to All In. It's not legal for me to put the show on live in the UK before I put it on for the people that pay 97% of the TV rights fees in Warner Brothers Discovery. They have earned the first right of airing the show, and they have the legal first right to air the show. I can't put Dynamite on anywhere before it airs on TBS and TNT, nor should I. TBS and TNT have been a great home to us. Fight has had at times issues in the stream of the show. I would love to do the show at some point, if possible, on ITV and put the show ideally on at the same time it's on TBS and TNT. I just can't jumpstart our primary media partner. In pro wrestling, those TV rights are a huge component of the business and really drive a lot of the revenue, along with huge tentpole events like AEW All In. Ideally, what I would like to do is simulcast it, but that would still be very late here. It's a 1 a.m. start. That's not ideal. Touching on the possibility of the Lucha Bros making their way to WWE, Matt Hardy noted on his Extreme Life podcast, they are one of the OG teams. They're a couple of the founding talents and really staples of the tag team division. I know we talked about this. They're probably the Young Bucks' greatest opponents too, which is a big deal if those guys do end up stepping away. I do think the team would thrive in WWE. I do, especially with how much they are playing towards the Hispanic market in this day and age, and especially going on tours in Mexico and South America. They would be huge. They would be huge. In a legal update on former WWE and current TNA star Rich Swann, Ringside News wrote that Rich Swann was arrested on June 8th in Altamonte Springs, Florida, on charges of disorderly public intoxication and causing a disturbance, both classified as misdemeanor offenses. According to the arrest report, Swann was seen trying to forcefully enter an apartment, possibly mistaking it for his own. The resident inside the apartment, feeling threatened, armed himself with a handgun and confronted Swann, prompting him to back away and leave the property. Police later located Swann, who appeared intoxicated and admitted to drinking a lot. He was arrested after causing multiple disturbances in the area. Swann was released the following day on a $250 bond and is now being represented by a private attorney from the Joshi law firm in Orlando. This incident is Swann's second brush with the law for similar offenses, following a previous arrest in September 2022 for causing a disturbance while intoxicated at his apartment complex. According to PW Insider, there was a hearing yesterday afternoon concerning former TNA champion Rich Swann's arrest in June for disorderly public intoxication and causing a disturbance, which are misdemeanor offenses. Swann did not attend the hearing in person, but was represented by his attorney. Court records showed a status hearing regarding the case, and Swann's plea is scheduled for September 4th. This upcoming hearing will likely address how the case will proceed and whether Swann will enter a plea. In the meantime, Swann voluntarily entered into a substance abuse rehabilitation program, and he has been suspended by TNA Wrestling. Naming those on the current WWE roster that he would like to manage, Jimmy Hart told Comic Book, "I would take Austin Theory. I love him. I think he's got a lot of possibilities. Pretty Deadly, the tag team Pretty Deadly. I love to be with those guys. And so I think the ladies, Piper Niven, I'd like to be with Piper. I'm telling you right now, she's got the look, she's got the size. She could do so many great things in the ring, and I think she's that close to being maybe a world champion, but she'd be great. I'd like to be by her side because I had the Glamour girls at one time. Remember Judy, Lonnie Khan, and Judy Martin." During an interview with the Comic-Con, former WWE star AJ Lee was asked about her autobiography becoming a TV show. You're developing Crazy as My Superpower into a television series for A&E Network. What is it like laying your whole life on the line and then doing it in live action where so many people are going to see it? I mean, that was an interesting struggle at first because I am the most private person in the world. I'm like a brick wall. So when you have a lot of people listening to you, the things you say matter. There's value in that. You have to be really considerate. I was willing to share this life lesson I learned in embracing my mental health struggles. That's a piece of me I'm willing to share with the world if it can help other people. My book is very much about growing up in poverty and homelessness, not understanding the mental illness beginning in my body and within my family, and learning how to embrace these things that the world sees as negatives and turn them into armor and strengths. So that's been a huge part of my creative process, embracing this weird, messed up mind I have. Talking about Buddy Murphy's status with AEW, Disco Inferno said this on Keeping It 100. Buddy Murphy re-signed, right? Okay, so I think they're staying, which is kind of weird because all I've heard from sources is that they're, House of Black, a pain to deal with backstage. They're constantly turning down creative, but I guess they didn't want him going back to WWE, so they re-signed him. But I wonder, based on all the things we're hearing, that these guys were a pain, that WWE really didn't want them back. You know what I'm saying? They sound like troublemakers a little bit, so why would WWE want them back in a locker room that's having massive success right now? House of Black member Brody King responded, "Hey, Disco Inferno, go F yourself." Giving his critique of the management side of AEW, Mark Henry noted on Busted Open Radio that WWE has an advantage because they have experience and time on their side. AEW is a young company and it needs to have the screws tightened still, and some decisions have to be made. Who's going to run the show? And how soon can you get to work? Because a lot of times things are left hanging in the balance too long, and stuff ends up not getting done. And then there's the afterthought, oh, we gotta go do this. We start in 20 minutes, it's too late by then. After sharing a conspiracy regarding the Sandy Hook shooting, Ronda Rousey has once again apologized for this, writing on X, "I can't say how many times I've redrafted this apology over the last 11 years. How many times I've convinced myself it wasn't the right time or that I'd be causing even more damage by giving it. But 11 years ago, I made the single most regrettable decision of my life. I watched a Sandy Hook conspiracy video and reposted it on Twitter. I didn't even believe it, but was so horrified at the truth that I was grasping for an alternative fiction to cling to instead. I quickly realized my mistake and took it down, but the damage was done. By some miracle, it seemingly slipped under the media's radar. I was never asked about it, so I never spoke of it again, afraid that calling attention to it would have the opposite of the intended effect. It could increase the views of those conspiracy videos and, selfishly, inform even more people I was ignorant, self-absorbed, and tone-deaf enough to share one in the first place. I drafted 1,000 apology to include in my last memoir, but my publisher begged me to take it out, saying it would overshadow everything else and do more harm than good. So I convinced myself that apologizing would just reopen the wound for no other reason than me, selfishly, trying to make myself feel better, that I would hurt those suffering even more and possibly lead more people down the black hole of conspiracy BS by it being brought up again just so I could try to shake the label of being a Sandy Hook truther. But honestly, I deserve to be hated, labeled, detested, resented, and worse for it. I deserve to lose out on every opportunity. I should have been canceled. I would have deserved it. I still do. I apologize that this came 11 years too late, but to those affected by the Sandy Hook massacre, from the bottom of my heart and depth of my soul, I am so sorry for the hurt I caused. I can't even begin to imagine the pain you've endured, and words cannot describe how thoroughly remorseful and ashamed I am of myself for contributing to it. I've regretted it every day of my life since and will continue to do so until the day I die. And to anyone else that's fallen down the black hole of BS, it doesn't make you edgy or an independent thinker. You're not doing your due diligence entertaining every possibility by digesting these conspiracies. They will only make you feel powerless, afraid, miserable, and isolated. You're doing nothing but hurting others and yourself. Regardless of how many bridges you've burned over it, stop digging yourself a deeper hole. Don't get wrapped up in the sunk cost fallacy. No matter how long you've gone down the wrong road, you should still turn back. Revealing his interest in a return to WWE, Konnan said this on his Keeping It 100 podcast. Is there any chance of WWE and AAA working together? I don't see why not. Do you have correspondence with Triple H? We've had a couple talks. You wouldn't be able to work in the WWE system. You previously said that, but would your outlook now change under the new regime with Hunter and Nick Khan? Yes. For a recap on the confrontation between MJF and Britt Baker in AEW and Will Ospreay's thoughts on the matter, Ringside News wrote that AEW's locker room has been in the spotlight this month due to a heated confrontation between Britt Baker and MJF. This incident has sparked a lot of talk among wrestling fans and industry insiders, and now Will Ospreay has finally addressed the same. The clash started when Britt Baker made comments about MJF and his girlfriend, Alicia Atout, during the July 17th episode of Dynamite. Atout relayed these comments to MJF, leading to a heated argument. The situation got to a point where even Will Ospreay tried to mediate by talking to Baker. Things escalated further when MJF, upset about the situation, punched a wall backstage, showing how intense the emotions and stakes were. Despite this, Britt Baker continued to appear on TV. An HR investigation followed, resulting in a brief suspension for Baker. The investigation also looked into claims that she had a verbal confrontation with Atout and asked for her removal from the women's locker room. Baker's suspension was lifted when she returned via video on the August 7th episode of AEW television. While speaking to the New York Post, Will Ospreay addressed reports of MJF and Britt Baker's backstage confrontation and called it the most blown out of proportion thing he had ever seen. It's the most completely blown out of proportion thing I ever seen in my entire life. I'm just trying to bring people together as a team. That's all I can say. I'm fully aware people don't like each other backstage. I know there are people backstage that I don't like. My whole thing is that going forward, we all need to be a team. We all need to look after one another. MJF also stated that the stories of his backstage confrontation with Britt Baker were blown out of proportion. Providing details on his neck injury heading into AEW's All-In event where he will challenge Swerve Strickland for the world title, Bryan Danielson told Bleacher Report, "My neck is trashed, but other than that, I feel good. One of the things that I'm good at is experiencing pain and it not necessarily affecting me much. It doesn't really affect my mental space. The only thing that it does kind of affect is my parenting because our son is 4 and wild. He loves jumping on my back and jumping on my neck, and I'm like, ugh, stop. It affects my training and that sort of thing. But other than that, I feel good. The odds are by the end of the year, I'm probably going to have to get neck surgery or whatever it is. But right now, it feels manageable. And when I get out and wrestle, I feel invincible. So that's not even a concern." When it comes to plans for Intercontinental Champion Bron Breakker, Ringside News wrote that WWE has several plans in motion and each champion needs a worthy challenger. Bron Breakker, who is still riding high as the Intercontinental Champion, is part of those plans. However, consider this a spoiler warning for what follows. It has now been reported via PWN that the winner of the ongoing tournament to determine the #1 contender for the Intercontinental Championship is set to face Bron Breakker at Bad Blood. As of now, it doesn't seem that the title will be defended in Berlin. confirming the contract status of Ricky Starks, who was rumored to be WWE bound. AEW President Tony Khan said this during the All In media call. Ricky has been a great star in AEW, been a champion here, and has had great matches here. I think very highly of Ricky. He's somebody that has been here for several years, and he's under contract in AEW. He's a well-regarded wrestler here in AEW. And this was your Pro Wrestling News Update. I hope you're all having a great day. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see y'all later.